First, I'd like to say thank you to all of our authors for presenting their OERs. I hope that even if you aren't able to directly make use of one of their resources, that each of you is inspired in some way for our own teaching. I know that I was inspired by Mark's presentation to incorporate air quality data into an assignment question that I have to make up this week. And I can't wait for our COVID-19 lockdown in Toronto to be over so that I can go out and order a fancy coffee from my local barista. On a serious note, I'm excited about the quality of materials that we are publishing through EngageCSEdu, and I want to talk for a few minutes about that publishing process. First, a little history. EngageCSEdu was originally developed by the U.S. National Center for Women in Technology, NCWIT, together with Google. Both organizations recognize the importance of introductory computing courses in recruiting and retaining women in the computing field. Research shows that having high-quality assignments, projects, and labs that engage students can increase the recruitment and retention of women and other underrepresented minorities in computing. So together, these organizations built EngageCSEdu. I got involved with Engage about 2 years ago when the existing leadership wanted it to become more central in the computing education community. To accomplish that, the project needed to transition from a repository only to a publishing venue, since that's what counts for faculty evaluations. I was particularly interested because I am a teaching stream faculty member, and my primary scholarship, what I care about the most and spend my time crafting, is the assignments, labs, projects, worksheets, etc. that I create for my students. So today, we are super excited to announce that EngageCSEdu has officially transitioned to be under the leadership of the ACM. The repository and online electronic publication is under ACM ownership and governance. We are officially a special project of the ACM Education Board. This change in ownership has a number of benefits. Now, when an OER is accepted for publication by the EngageCSEdu editors, it will receive a DOI number and be included in the ACM digital library. It will have a proper ACM reference and it can be cited. The student-facing materials and particularly editable source versions will continue to be downloadable from the EngageCSEdu site, but that repository server and the code is now owned and managed by ACM. And we haven't backed off the commitment to remain open access. Even the materials in the DL will still be freely available to anyone. Another benefit is that the submission and reviewing process has now moved to ScholarOne, the standard professional software for managing a review process. This allows us to now have full double-blind reviews and makes it easier to manage all the communication between editors, associate editors, reviewers, authors, and publishers. When you sign up to be a reviewer, you'll see how slick it is. Or maybe you already use ScholarOne to review for other journals, and the mechanics of reviewing for EngageCSEdu will be just the same. One thing that is different between EngageCSEdu reviews and reviews for other publications is that for OERs submitted to Engage, we have 2 different types of reviewers. 2 of the 3 reviewers are designated to specifically focus on the computer science aspects of the submission. Is it good science and good pedagogy for teaching the computing concepts that are stated learning goals of the resource? Are the instructions clear and unambiguous? Can the work be assessed reasonably and efficiently? Does any provided code meet professional computing standards? One of the CS reviewers is specifically tasked with actually following the student-facing directions and implementing the assignment or doing the lab. The other CS reviewer is tasked with reviewing the starter code and verifying any hyperlinks to background material. Another set of reviewers are chosen for their expertise as social scientists. These reviewers evaluate whether the resource incorporates research-supported practices for broadening participation in CS. NCWIT has formalized a set of these research-supported practices into the Engagement Practices Framework. When the EngageCSEdu project was owned and managed by NCWIT, each submission was required to identify which specific engagement practice it used, from the framework. We have broadened this requirement to include the incorporation of other evidence-based inclusion practices that may be outside of the NC-WIT framework, such as culturally relevant pedagogy or universal design for learning. But we still require submissions to make use of an evidence-based inclusion practice and to specifically identify that practice and how it is incorporated into the submission. So let's talk for a minute about how you submit something to EngageCSEdu. Suppose you have a terrific assignment idea from your CS1 class that exercises an important concept, say Python dictionaries, just to have a concrete example. And your assignment ties this into some current social issue, say coronavirus vaccine distribution. The first step is to actually give the assignment to your students. We want materials published in the EngageCSEdu collection to have been tested in real classrooms. Then, when you've discovered that the assignment is fabulous, except for a few niggly bits that you've now corrected and documented, you're ready to think about submitting it to EngageCSEdu. The first step is to download the EngageCSEdu template. It's available in Word and LaTeX to make most people happy, and is an outline of what will become the main document that appears in the digital library. The audience for this paper is other CS instructors, people who might want to use the resource in their own classroom. This isn't for students, but of course, because it is public, students might find it by Googling. Does it look familiar? It mostly looks like a SIGCSE short paper with a few extra bits. It has more metadata that will help the reader understand your resource and whether it will work for their course. This metadata is also used for searching when on the EngageCSEdu website. Let's go through the items. Here you have to specify the course. This isn't the course number of your course at your institution. That's not very helpful to readers from around the globe. Instead, it is one of these four choices: CS0, CS1, data structures, or discrete math. Sometimes the same OER can be adjusted to make sense at different course levels, so you can actually pick more than one of these. And in future, we hope to expand to other courses. Next, we have resource type. Authors can only pick one here, and in our case, we want assignment. The other options are lab, project, lecture slides, tutorial, or other. Next, you specify the programming language, or languages, again picking from a list on the submission site. Then knowledge unit. This is also a choice of one of the best fit from a discrete set of choices. The CS concepts, which comes next, is like the CCS concepts on a regular ACM research paper. We have created an ontology of concepts, a hierarchy, and authors need to pick up to 3 concepts from the list. We are building a GUI tool to make this selection and formatting easier, but for now, authors just need to look at the list. And finally, the author must designate which Creative Commons license they want for their materials. Everything accepted into the collection must have a Creative Commons license. Another difference you might notice between this paper and a typical SIGCSE paper is that this paper doesn't explicitly have an abstract. Instead, it has a synopsis. This synopsis is what will display in the digital library as the abstract, and be submitted on Scholar One as the abstract. We felt that readers of this paper would be most interested in the overall description of the OER, the synopsis from the old EngageCSEdu site. And so it should be the summary. We considered just renaming it abstract, but then we were concerned that authors would feel the need to repeat that information in the body of the paper, which didn't necessarily make sense for such a short document. The synopsis should contain a reasonably concise description of the OER. In the case of an assignment, this will probably be the main learning goals of the assignment and a summary of what it is that the students are asked to do. It should be enough information that other instructors can decide if they want to read further. The synopsis is limited to 2,000 words. Below the synopsis is the ACM reference format, so other authors can cite this work. And then the author selected keywords, just the same as with a regular conference paper. The next 2 sections of the paper are required. The first is where the paper should talk about how the resource engages students and what evidence-based inclusion practices are incorporated. And here is where the authors can give specific recommendations and advice to other instructors who might want to adapt this resource for their own classrooms. After that, authors are free to add as many sections as they need in whatever order. Remember that the audience for this document is other instructors, not students directly. The student-facing materials get submitted separately. One of the sections after recommendations should be resource details, and it should outline all the other files that are available for download. This might include student-facing handouts, marking guidelines, extra support resources, starter code. Something that should not be included are sample solutions. If authors would like to offer sample solutions, they can invite potential adopters to contact them at their email addresses, which are provided here. Once the paper is ready, there is still a bit of work to do before submitting. Since the review is double-blind, you need to make a redacted copy that doesn't include any identifying information. The next step is to prepare all the other materials that are part of the resource. Remember that this includes any student-facing handouts or instructions, marking guidelines, supporting materials, starter code. The author's identity and institution needs to be removed from all of these materials as well for the double-blind review. In situations where authors want acknowledgement of their work, they could simply redact this information for review purposes and then later submit a camera-ready version at publication time. But in many cases, you might find that it makes more sense to just remove the institution-specific, course-specific, or instructor-specific bits permanently from the student-facing pieces of the OER. This makes it easier for other instructors to adopt and use the material. The next step is to create a single zip file of all the materials other than the main paper. Then you need to create an account on Scholar One and do the submission. Just like when you do a paper submission, you need to repeat some of the information from the paper, like the abstract and the metadata, as part of the submission process. Maybe a few of you are excited enough about EngageCSEdu now that you would be willing to become a reviewer. Let's take just a few minutes to talk about that. First, you should know that we take the reviewing process very seriously and have high expectations of our reviewers. This isn't a quick read through the paper to decide accept or reject. We are looking for a careful scholarly evaluation with significant feedback to the authors. We require at least one CS reviewer to fully implement the solution to any coding assignment and to evaluate any starter code against professional norms. For this reason, we encourage reviewers to identify in their Scholar One profiles the programming languages and course levels for which they feel competent to review. For social science reviewers, we expect that they have academic training in a relevant area. To volunteer to be a reviewer, you should email us at EngageCSEdu@acm.org. Express your interest and send us your CV, and indicate if you want to be considered as a CS or a social science reviewer. We would love to hear from you. Finally, don't forget to tell all your colleagues about EngageCSEdu. We don't want to be the best kept secret. We want everyone to know about this resource and make use of it, submit to it, and have their scholarly pedagogical work recognized and valued.